Today we are going to look at zero and negative exponents. They have special rules. When you take anything to the zero power, it's always going to equal 1. And that's what that first line says. As long as x doesn't equal 0, if you put any x value to the zero power, it equals 1. And that is a property of zero exponents. And the next one, if you have something to a negative power, it says x to the negative n, what you can do to force it to be to the positive power is put it in the denominator. So it's going to be 1 over x to the n. And that's a property of negative exponents. Let's try some examples. And you could type the first one in the calculator if you want to, if you don't believe me about the zero exponents. But if you type 7 to the zero power, your calculator will give you 1, because anything to the zero power is 1. Using that idea, x to the zero power is 1. Quantity 4x to the zero power is 1. Now this last one is not 1, because the only thing to the zero power here is the x, as opposed to the previous one where it was the 4x. So this is actually negative 2 times 1, which is negative 2. So just be careful with that. The next piece, you could type all three of these in your calculator. It will give you an answer and it will be correct. But I'm going to practice right now doing it without the calculator because when we get to letters, like in the next part, you're not going to be able to use the calculator for it. So 4 to the negative second power. I can rewrite that as 1 over 4 squared. Because when I put something, when I have a negative power on something, if I want to make it a positive power, you put it in the denominator. So, and then 4 squared is 16. So 1 over 16 is your final answer there. For the 1/2 to the negative 1 power, if you have a fraction and it's to a negative power, just flip the fraction. So 1/2 to the negative 1 becomes 2 over 1 to the first. 2 over 1 to the first power is 2. This next piece, I'm just going to do that 2 times 5 first. That's really 10 to the negative 4 over 5 to the negative 2. Now what I have to do is I need to get rid of those negative powers. I will put that 10 in the denominator and that 5 piece in the numerator. So moving the 10 to the negative 4th in the denominator becomes 10 to the 4th. Moving 5 to the negative 2 to the numerator will become 5 squared. 5 squared is 25. 10 to the 4th is 10,000. And we can reduce that to 1 over 400. Now let's do the same thing below, except this time with letters. So x to the negative 6th power will become 1 over x to the 6th. 6a to the negative 4, well, if I want to get rid of that negative exponent, because that's what the directions say to do, I'm going to move that a to the negative 4 to the numerator. So it's going to be 6a to the 4th. For the next piece, negative 64 divided by 2 is negative 32. X to the 4th divided by x to the 5th, what you do is you subtract your exponents. So 4 minus 5 is a negative 1. And you have that a to the negative 2 in that numerator and that b to the negative 4 in the denominator. Since I want positive exponents, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the x, the a, and the b. I'm going to leave the 32 where it is because it doesn't have a negative exponent on it. So it's going to be negative 32. Moving the b to the numerator will be b to the 4th, divided by x a squared. And that's your final answer there. The next two questions are actually pretty easy. It's just different notation than you're used to seeing. So we have f of x equals x plus x to the negative 5th. Find f of 3. Well, f of 3 is just asking you to find or to plug a 3 in for x. Okay, and you could type that in your calculator. If you were to type it in your calculator, it'll give you a decimal. I'm going to ask you to change it to a fraction, 730 over 243. Same idea here, you're going to plug a -6 in for x. When you type this in your calculator, please use the parentheses that I have here. Make the power of -7. -6 to the -6 to the -7th power. And then you got to put it to the, I forgot the 4. Put it to the 4th power. When you do all of that, you end up getting something in your calculator like 1.6284 e -22. So that e is really scientific notation, so this will become 1.6284. Instead of e, you write times 10 to the -22nd. And you don't have to worry about that being a negative exponent there. We're not going to worry about that for scientific notation. Now this last piece, you don't see this on the Regents too much because they like positive exponents, but the directions here say write it without a denominator. So it doesn't matter if you have positive or negative exponents, as long as you don't have a denominator. For this first problem, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the division. So it's going to be a squared b cubed over ab to the 5th power. What I just said earlier, when you divide, you need to subtract exponents. So 2 minus 1 on those a's is just a 1, so it's a. B cubed over b to the 5th is b to the -2nd. And I know it's a negative exponent, but it doesn't want a fraction, so you leave it just like that. For this next piece, the only way to get rid of that fraction is to move that a to the 4th to the numerator. And when I do that, the power becomes negative, so it'll be 3a to the -4th. And finally, for this last piece here, 20 divided by 4 is 5. The 0 minus -1 is x to the 1st. -5 minus 5 is -10. At this point, you can try the do-nows.